Step into a flickering drive-in where glowing neon signs beckon you to nights of terror, wonder, and strange delights. The 1950s and 60s were a golden age of B-horror and sci-fi double features, films dismissed as cheap thrills but later hailed as cult treasures. What secrets lurked in these celluloid oddities? Tonight we're ranking 15 must-see classics. The Brain That Wouldn't Die, 1962. When this low-budget shocker debuted, critics laughed it off as trash cinema. Yet over time, The Brain That Wouldn't Die became one of the most iconic drive-in horror spectacles of its era. Its story follows a mad scientist who keeps his fiance's decapitated head alive in a tray while prowling nightclubs for a new body. It was derided for clumsy acting, clunky dialogue, and special effects that made audiences groan. But here's the twist. The grotesque imagery, especially the talking head whispering from its pan of chemicals, burned into the memories of teenagers who caught it at midnight shows. The studio even trimmed its gore to slip past censors. Yet somehow, that only made its reputation grow darker. Behind the scenes, the production was plagued with technical troubles. Scenes had to be reshot multiple times, and the climactic laboratory fire nearly injured crew members when poorly rigged pyrotechnics went off. Despite, or perhaps because of, its flaws, the film became a staple of horror TV reruns, immortalized in shows like Mystery Science Theater 3000. The film's legacy isn't one of polish, but persistence. It represents the pulpy, fearless spirit of the B-movie world. Messy, shocking, unforgettable. Plan 9 from Outer Space, 1959. Infamous as the worst movie ever made, Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space was a box office failure that later rose from the grave as the ultimate cult treasure. Its premise, aliens reanimating Earth's dead to stop humanity from developing a doomsday weapon, was as absurd as its cardboard sets and visible boom mics. Publicly, the film was ridiculed. Actors stumbled through dialogue, spaceships were clearly model kits, and continuity errors abounded. But what audiences missed at first was its sincerity. Wood believed in every word of his script, and that raw passion shines through. The movie became legendary for its oddities. Bela Lugosi appears in a few silent scenes, shot before his death. To finish the film, Wood hired his wife's chiropractor to play Lugosi's role, hiding his face with a cape. Critics tore it apart, but the film's charm, born of desperation and eccentricity, eventually drew fans who celebrated its imperfections. Today, Plan 9 is studied in film schools as a case of so bad it's good cinema. It teaches that movies don't have to be flawless to be beloved. Sometimes sincerity and audacity are enough to earn immortality. Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, 1958. When it premiered, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman was mocked as silly and exploitative. Audiences chuckled at its crude effects, the giant woman's transparent double exposures, and toy cars. Yet beneath its drive-in absurdity, the film carried a strange feminist undercurrent. The story follows Nancy Archer, a wealthy woman ignored by her philandering husband. When she encounters a mysterious alien, she grows to towering size, finally powerful enough to confront betrayal head-on. In a decade dominated by submissive female roles, Nancy's destructive rampage felt like an act of rebellion. Production was rough. The film's tiny budget forced creative shortcuts, including a papier-mâché hand that looked more comic than menacing. Still, the poster, featuring the giantess straddling a freeway, became one of the most iconic images in sci-fi history. Decades later, critics reevaluated the film, seeing it as a campy allegory of female rage against a patriarchal society. What was once derided as nonsense became a cultural artifact, cherished for its unintended social commentary. The truth? Nancy Archer didn't just crush cars, she crushed expectations of what a B-movie could symbolize. The Tingler, 1959. When William Castle released The Tingler, it wasn't just a movie, it was an event. Castle, the king of cinematic gimmicks, knew that B-horror needed more than monsters on the screen. It needed to leap into the audience's lap. Critics dismissed the film as a publicity stunt, but to drive in crowds, it was unforgettable. The story follows a pathologist, played by Vincent Price, who discovers a parasite that attaches to human spines and feeds on fear. The only way to weaken the tingler is to scream. That premise alone was wild enough, but Castle's true genius lay in Percepto, his theater gimmick. He rigged random seats with vibrating buzzers, shocking unsuspecting viewers during key scenes. Imagine the chaos when people screamed and laughed as their chairs suddenly jolted them. This was immersive cinema decades before 4DX. Behind the scenes, Price had a ball hamming up his role, especially during the famous LSD sequence, one of the first depictions of acid in mainstream film. Castle, meanwhile, cut corners on effects, reusing sets from other Columbia productions and relying on rubber props for the tingler itself. Yet what critics saw as cheap, fans saw as charming. At the time, reviewers scoffed at Castle's stunts, calling them gimmickry over substance. But time was kind. Today, the tingler is remembered not just as a B-horror oddity, but as a pioneering experiment in interactive film. Its legacy reminds us that horror isn't only about what you see, it's about what you feel in your bones. The Wasp Woman, 1959. Produced by Roger Corman, the undisputed master of low-budget exploitation, The Wasp Woman was dismissed as just another creature feature cash grab. Yet beneath its hasty production and rubbery special effects lay a surprisingly haunting fable about vanity and the price of eternal youth. The plot follows Janice Starlin, a cosmetics executive who becomes desperate to reverse aging. She tests an experimental enzyme derived from wasps, and at first it restores her beauty. But soon she transforms into a monstrous hybrid, half woman, half wasp, stalking victims in her lab. Drive-in audiences ate up the sensational poster art, but critics rolled their eyes at the clumsy monster makeup and rushed ending. The truth is, Corman shot the film in just a few weeks on a shoestring budget, padding it later with extra scenes when distributors demanded more runtime. The creature effects were crude, but Susan Cabot's tragic performance gave the film a chilling center. Behind the camera, Corman's efficiency set the standard for exploitation filmmaking. Get it made fast, cheap, and market it with a killer poster. Over time, the film's allegory of corporate greed and female body image struck a chord. In a society obsessed with youth, The Wasp Woman feels more relevant than ever. What began as a disposable B-movie now lingers as a cautionary tale of ambition gone horribly wrong. It, The Terror from Beyond Space, 1958. On release, It, The Terror from Beyond Space seemed like another pulpy monster on the loose flick, but history would prove it one of the most influential B-sci-fi films of all time. Why? Because its story of a deadly alien stowing away on a spaceship directly inspired Ridley Scott's Alien 2 decades later. The premise follows the crew of a rocket returning from Mars only to discover a murderous extraterrestrial hiding on board. The alien, played by stuntman Ray Corrigan in a bulky rubber suit, hunts the astronauts one by one, cornering them in claustrophobic corridors. Critics at the time dismissed it as formulaic, noting its modest sets and predictable scares. But audiences at drive-ins found themselves gripped by the atmosphere of paranoia. Production was bare bones. Filmed in just 6 days, the budget forced the crew to recycle sets and rely on stock sound effects. Still, director Edward L. Kahn managed to wring tension from shadows and tight spaces, foreshadowing the more polished claustrophobia of later sci-fi horror. While it never achieved box office glory, its DNA spread across the genre. Writers, filmmakers, and fans recognized its skeletal blueprint for future classics. Today, It, The Terror from Beyond Space stands as proof that even the humblest B-movie can spark cinematic revolutions. The Amazing Colossal Man, 1957. In the wake of the atomic bomb, American sci-fi films wrestled with anxieties of radiation, power, and destruction. The Amazing Colossal Man, a low-budget shocker from American International Pictures, embodied those fears in the most literal way. A man growing to terrifying size after a plutonium explosion. Initially, the film was seen as a knockoff of The Incredible Shrinking Man, only in reverse. Critics derided its special effects, rear projections, miniature sets, and an unconvincing giant puppet head. But audiences couldn't look away from Glenn Langan's tragic performance as Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Manning, a soldier transformed into a giant freak. His growth became his curse, his body breaking down as his humanity slipped away. Director Bertford Gordon, nicknamed Mr. Big for his love of oversized monsters, shot the film on a shoestring, reusing Las Vegas backdrops and military stock footage. Yet his storytelling gave the monster movie a rare sense of pathos. Manning wasn't just a menace, he was a victim of science and circumstance. The film spawned a sequel, War of the Colossal Beast, cementing its place in atomic age horror. Though never praised as high art, it resonates today as a parable of human ambition colliding with uncontrollable forces. Manning's towering figure remains a haunting metaphor for the dangers of unchecked power in the nuclear era. The Giant Claw, 1957. When audiences first saw the giant claw, many reportedly laughed out loud. This was supposed to be a terrifying sci-fi thriller about a gigantic bird from space, yet the monster resembled a bizarre, bug-eyed marionette with a crooked beak and wiry feathers. The movie was instantly mocked, dismissed as one of Columbia Pictures' cheapest embarrassments. The premise is classic 1950s paranoia. Radar systems detect a mysterious object, which turns out to be a monstrous bird, bigger than a battleship, attacking planes and cities. Its impenetrable antimatter shield makes it unstoppable. On paper, terrifying. On screen, less so. The puppet's laughable design turned what was meant as horror into unintended comedy. Even star Jeff Morrow admitted he wanted to crawl under his seat at the premiere when the creature appeared. Behind the scenes, the fault wasn't entirely the filmmakers. Director Fred F. Sears shot the film straight, never intending camp. Columbia outsourced the monster design to a low-budget studio in Mexico without informing the cast or crew. By the time the puppet arrived, it was too late and too expensive to change. The crew had filmed everything else, so they had no choice but to use it. Despite its infamy, the movie gained cult appeal. Midnight screenings turned it into a comedy event, and decades later it's beloved as one of the best so bad it's good sci-fi relics. Beneath the puppet, though, lies a surprisingly tense Cold War narrative about technology's inability to protect humanity from cosmic threats. Today, the giant claw soars not as terror, but as glorious camp legend. The Crawling Eye, 1958. Originally released in the UK as the Trollenberg Terror, this British import quickly became a staple of American drive-ins under its creepier new title, The Crawling Eye. Its reputation? A modest sci-fi chiller elevated by an unforgettable monster design, massive, grotesque eyeballs with tentacles descending from a radioactive cloud in the Swiss Alps. Audiences were drawn by its eerie concept, an invisible threat hiding in mist-shrouded mountains. On screen, scientists, psychics, and climbers battle the creatures while a small alpine village trembles in fear. Critics at the time found the effects crude, rubber tentacles, miniatures, and puppetry, but they couldn't deny the film's unsettling atmosphere. Behind the scenes, the film was adapted from a popular British television serial. Low budgets forced the crew to reuse sets and build monsters quickly. Still, the claustrophobic alpine locations and chilling cloud imagery created a haunting mood that stuck with viewers. It also marked one of Forrest Tucker's notable genre roles as he lent American star power to the international production. When the film hit U.S. screens, it was marketed with lurid posters promising a new dimension in horror. And while box office returns were modest, television syndication kept The Crawling Eye alive in pop culture. Later generations embraced it as classic camp. It even became the very first movie riffed on Mystery Science Theater 3000. But beyond parody, its central image, tentacled eyes descending from radioactive clouds, remains one of the most surreal metaphors of 1950s nuclear anxiety. The Crawling Eye proves that sometimes one unforgettable image is enough to cement cult immortality. Earth versus the Flying Saucers, 1956. In the mid-1950s, as UFO hysteria gripped America, Earth versus the Flying Saucers landed in theaters. At first, critics dismissed it as another alien invasion flick with stiff acting and predictable plotting. But the film's saving grace, and its lasting legacy, was the groundbreaking stop-motion effects of Ray Harryhausen. The story is familiar. Aliens arrive, humanity panics, and global cities fall under attack. Yet Harryhausen's meticulous animation of the saucers brought unprecedented realism. He painstakingly crafted miniature saucers, then animated them frame by frame to crash into monuments like the Capitol Building and the Washington Monument. These sequences dazzled audiences, making the film stand out amid the flood of B-grade alien flicks. Behind the scenes, Harryhausen's work was grueling. Each saucer shot required hours of careful manipulation. Director Fred F. Sears filmed the live-action portions quickly and cheaply, knowing Harryhausen's visuals would carry the movie. The budget forced awkward compromises elsewhere, wooden dialogue, thin character arcs, but the destruction sequences became iconic. Over time, critics reappraised the film as one of Harryhausen's most important works, influencing decades of sci-fi cinema. The imagery of saucers toppling Washington landmarks still echoes in modern blockbusters like Independence Day. Though the script may have been boilerplate, the artistry of its effect secured its immortality. Today, Earth versus the Flying Saucers represents the magic of B-sci-fi at its finest, an ordinary premise elevated by extraordinary craft. Them, 1954. When Them premiered, it was billed as just another atomic age monster flick. Yet this Warner Brothers production defied expectations, becoming one of the first and greatest giant insect movies. While other creature features were laughed off, Them stunned critics with its intensity, earning both box office success and critical praise. The story unfolds in New Mexico, where radiation from atomic testing mutates ants into colossal killers. Investigators, soldiers, and scientists unravel the mystery, culminating in a showdown in the storm drains of Los Angeles. What made Them different was its craftsmanship. The giant ant models, though mechanical, were designed with uncanny realism, creating genuine suspense instead of unintentional comedy. Behind the scenes, the film was originally intended to be in 3D and color, but budget cuts forced Warner to scale back. Despite limitations, the stark black and white cinematography added grit and atmosphere. Actors like James Whitmore and a young James Arness grounded the pulp story with serious performances, lending weight to the absurd premise. Critics praised its taut pacing and eerie imagery, with many calling it one of the best sci-fi films of the decade. Over time, it became a prototype for countless imitators, but few matched its balance of thrills, paranoia, and artistry. Unlike many B-movies, Them transcended its origins, proving that even giant bugs could tell a story about humanity's reckless embrace of nuclear power. Its chilling final line, "When man entered the atomic age, he opened a door into a new world. What we will eventually find in that new world, nobody can predict," still resonates today. The Blob, 1958. When The Blob oozed into theaters, few expected it to endure beyond its initial drive-in run. Critics dismissed it as another gimmicky creature feature. Yet decades later, it remains one of the most iconic B-horror films of all time, largely thanks to its unique monster and its then-unknown leading man, Steve McQueen. The plot is deceptively simple. A gelatinous alien mass crashes to Earth, growing larger as it consumes everything in its path. Unlike rubber-suited monsters or stop-motion creatures, the Blob was a shapeless, unstoppable entity, pure nightmare fuel. Teenagers discover the threat, but no adults believe them until it's too late. Behind the scenes, the movie was produced on a tiny budget by a small Pennsylvania studio. The Blob itself was created using silicone and dyed red, filmed over miniature sets to make it appear massive. Director Irvin Yeworth leaned on creativity instead of money, and the result was surprisingly effective. Steve McQueen, in his first starring role, was paid just $3,000, a decision he regretted when the film became a surprise hit. Its theme song, a bouncy tune by Burt Bacharach, added a strange charm, contrasting its horror imagery with playful lyrics. Though initially overlooked, The Blob grew into a cult sensation. It captured the paranoia of the 1950s, where an invisible, creeping threat could devour small towns whole. Its success spawned a sequel, a 1970s remake, and endless parodies. The Blob's amorphous terror still resonates. It's the fear of something unstoppable, uncontainable, and incomprehensible. A monster without a face, but never forgotten. The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. Though not a B-movie in budget or prestige, The Day the Earth Stood Still became a cornerstone of sci-fi double-feature culture. It arrived during the height of Cold War tensions, delivering a message that critics initially debated but later hailed as visionary. The film tells of Klaatu, an alien visitor, and his towering robot Gort. Landing in Washington, D.C., Klaatu warns humanity that their violent ways threaten not only themselves, but the universe. If Earth cannot change, it will be destroyed. At the time, audiences expected alien invaders to be villains. Instead, Klaatu was a moral teacher, a radical subversion of genre conventions. Behind the camera, director Robert Wise and screenwriter Edmund North adapted Harry Bates's short story with a clear anti-war message. Bernard Herrmann's eerie theremin score gave the film its otherworldly aura. Production values were high for the era, yet its release alongside B-horror double bills allowed it to reach audiences who normally craved pulp thrills. Initially, some critics complained about its preachy message. Others praised it as serious science fiction in a field dominated by schlock. Over time, it became revered as one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made, its warning about human self-destruction still chilling today. Its iconic line, Klaatu Barada Nikto, entered pop culture lore, symbolizing both the hope and fear of alien intervention. The Day the Earth Stood Still transcended B-movie trappings to prove that sci-fi could be both entertaining and profound. Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. At the top of our list is Creature from the Black Lagoon, a film that was both a studio production and a drive-in phenomenon. Released by Universal, it was designed as a monster movie spectacle, yet over time it became the crown jewel of 1950s creature features. The story follows scientists exploring the Amazon, where they encounter the Gill Man, a half-man, half-fish creature defending his lagoon. What might have been dismissed as another rubber suit monster film became something more, a haunting, tragic tale of beauty, science, and the unknown. On release, audiences were terrified by its underwater photography, cutting edge for the time. Rico Browning performed the Gill Man's aquatic scenes in Florida Springs, holding his breath for minutes at a time, while Ben Chapman played the creature on land. The dual performances gave the Gill Man both menace and sorrow. The film was originally released in 3D, immersing audiences in its jungle world. Though critics labeled it pulp, the movie resonated with themes of nature versus civilization and the loneliness of the outsider. Over time, the Gill Man became Universal's last great monster icon, joining the ranks of Dracula and Frankenstein. Its influence is vast. Guillermo del Toro even cited it as inspiration for his Oscar-winning The Shape of Water. More than a B-movie, Creature from the Black Lagoon endures as a tale of misunderstood monstrosity, where the monster is perhaps more human than those who hunt him. From giant insects to alien invaders, these B-horror and sci-fi double features captured more than cheap thrills. They reflected the hopes, fears, and wild imaginations of their era. Which of these pulpy classics still haunts you? Comment your favorites below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more cinematic deep dives.